Hey, Paul Morrow again, back Smart Financial Lifestyle Interviews. Another inspiring person that we want to talk to today is Ruth Farmer. Hey, Ruth.
Good morning. Good to see you.
It is so great. Ruth and I have a long-standing relationship, which involves a lot of things, mountains, cats, all kinds of different stuff. But today, I think for everybody that's watching, Ruth has a super inspiring story. Also, it feeds right into some of the work that we've done relative to college education, which we'll get to. And also, I think that Ruth has a lot to say about the entire sort of education system as a whole sort of like intestine that people have to squeeze through to get out the other end and get their education. So Ruth and I are talking. She's in Colorado, which is one of the states we share together, and I'm in Massachusetts. So Ruth, tell me, I guess first and foremost, how did you end up in Colorado? Because I think you started in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, I did. I was in Oregon for a long time, and then in 2004, I had been implementing a program at the Girl Scouts locally, and they got a federal appropriation to expand the program nationally. And so I was called to the mothership. So I moved to New York City,
Huh?
and I was in New York City for a few years, and sort of not on a whim, but I went to a conference at Oxford University and found out that they had a sort of social impact MBA track. And so I decided to apply to the MBA program at Oxford. So I went to Oxford University. And when I was leaving Oxford, I was like, okay, well, I've got to get a job and I've got all this debt now because I didn't, it was like the dollar compared to the pound was terrible at the time. So I paid a lot of money for that Oxford degree. And so I only looked for C-level jobs because I'm like, I got to pay this debt back. And I had been the Girl Scout liaison to the National Center for Women in IT, which was based at CU Boulder in Colorado. And so they sort of recruited me. They had just gotten a National Science Foundation grant. And so they recruited me out to Colorado. But it's turned out to be a fantastic place to work nationally because I can be anywhere in the US in 4 hours or less, direct nonstop. And, I can fly to the East Coast and have a meeting the same day, which is really useful because when I used to work out of New York City, every time you go to the West, you're losing a whole day.
Yeah.
So it's been, and it's beautiful here and it's sunny all the time. And I haven't had to shovel snow once this winter. So.
All right. Well, that's how it is this year in Colorado. Not great for the ski areas, but good for Ruth. So tell me, Ruth, one of the things that we know about each other over the long term is that you have this incredible personal story, and I think that if you're comfortable talking about it, I think that also the Scouts kind of fit into that because you also have a deep, probably you're the most involved person in scouting I've ever met. And I've met a lot of folks that are involved in scouting. But so give us a little bit of your personal life, the life and times of Ruth Farmer. And then if you can bolt on the scouts to it, like how you ended up getting lucky enough to get involved with Girl Scouts. Tell us all a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I had a pretty itinerant childhood. My family moved a lot of times. I think my sister and I sat down to count it once, and it was um, dozens and dozens of times. And I don't think we could actually nail it all down because a lot of it happened when we were quite small. But we moved a lot, and that meant changing schools all the time. That meant being the new kid a lot of the time. And actually, there's a whole thread in my, it's ironic that I'm working on women and girls and students in technology and engineering because I was actually a very afraid math kid. Like I was afraid of math. I didn't think I could do math. I didn't think I was good at math. And that was because I kept changing schools. And so, math is quite linear the way it's taught. It's building blocks. But if you're constantly changing schools, you're ending up in different places in the stream. And so my math education was quite disjointed. And I was entering high school, they were like, you need to take remedial math. And I was like, I cannot do any more long division. I am done with long division. And they let me take algebra. And I took algebra. I was like, oh, this is magic. I've got this. But I had this very like deep sense that like I was not a math person, I was not a technical person. I know now I should have been an engineer. I like rebuild things in my mind. I like remodel stuff while I'm walking around town, just looking at things. And so I definitely could have had a technical track. And it's interesting because my sister's an engineer, my brother's an industrial designer. Like it's in the blood, right? But
Mm.
I sort of joke that I now manufacture engineers, so that's okay because I'm still like contributing. So I had this really weird, you know, all over the place childhood. I did manage to go to only two high schools. And leaving high school, I applied to a college I applied to two small liberal arts colleges in Oregon and then I think Pratt Institute in New York. And I got a really, really good financial aid package at Lewis and Clark College, which I will give them all the credit in the world. They have a policy that they meet every student's financial need. So I was really lucky that we were poor enough and we had enough kids because my sister was also in college that we did the formula and I could get really good financial aid. I was still getting loans, but I had pretty good financial aid. Also, college was cheaper back then.
Yeah.
Um, and so I managed to get myself through college all on my own. And then I think the other um, really illustrative thing about me is I bought my first house at 21. So there was this little house that I would drive by all the time, and it was sitting empty. And houses did not sit empty in Portland, Oregon at that time. And I got the meter number off the power meter, and I called Portland General Electric, and I was like, "Can you tell me who owns this house?" And they're like, "No." And there was no internet at the time. There was nothing you could look it up. And they're like, "We can't do that." I was like, "Well, can you call him and tell him to call me?" So they call the owner and he calls me and I was like, "I want to rent this house." And he's like, "Not for rent, click." So I did the *69 thing
Yeah.
and I called him back and I was like, "Is it for sale?" And he wanted me to pay 65,000 and 10,000 down for this little house. And I was like, "I don't have any money down. I make $8 an hour. How about 10,000, how about 70,000, nothing down?" And he said yes. And he sold me that house. And he bought his first house at 19. So he kind of admired my chutzpah, I guess. And so I bought that little house and I lived in it for 13 years, which I don't think is a coincidence that I was looking for roots after being, itinerant most of my life. And ironically, once I joined the Girl Scouts, I don't think I've been home for 3 consecutive weeks since really 2005. I've been like on the road, which is fine because I know how to do that. Except for during COVID, that was kind of a nice little break. So then I ended up going to the Girl Scouts of USA, which is the world's largest women's or girls organization of any kind. And I actually became a Girl Scout late in my life, which I was not allowed to be a Girl Scout when I was a kid. My dad thought it would turn me into a feminist, which is kind of ironic given that I am literally a professional feminist now. Um, it was the sort of Gloria Steinem era, and he was like, "No, I did 4-H, but I didn't do Girl Scouts as a kid." But I became a Girl Scout member as soon as I was hired there. I started leading their STEM programs and tech and engineering programs, then moved to New York in 2005 to lead their program called Design and Discovery, which was a huge partnership with Intel to get more girls into the science fair and more girls designing and inventing things. And I'm still in touch with many of those girls, and they're all engineers today, which is really fun to watch. And and then ultimately that has really shaped my entire career because I found this missing piece that like tech and engineering is the one place where women weren't contributing at their respective population.
Yeah.
And it's also the one place where there's the most growth and money.
So
So I
how
wanted
did
to bring
you
those
how did
together.
you get yourself from the Girl Scouts to your involvement with STEM and being an advisor to the Obama administration? How did all that happen?
Yeah, so I was leading tech and engineering for Girl Scouts and then leading this research center that was looking at the impact of informal education experiences like Girl Scouting in whether or not someone becomes an engineer, right? So what do we do in the K through 12 experience to create more women engineers? And that organization, the National Center for Women in IT, recruited me after I finished Oxford University, where I did an MBA in social entrepreneurship. And I ended up in Colorado at CU Boulder, which is the anchor, research university in the state of Colorado, was the host for this organization, the National Center for Women in IT. And their goal was to fix the fact that back in 2005 and 6, the percentage of all students in computing was declining. Post-dot-com boom, after the dot-com bust, we just had really bad enrollment in computer science.
You
And so
don't
they
just
wanted to
mean women,
fix
you
that.
mean all students?
Everyone.
Okay.
It was declining for everyone. And so the theory of change was if women make up more than half of college students, but only 18% of computing students, what's the quickest way we could access a large pool of qualified people? Women who are already going to college, right? So we started to work on that issue, like our enrollment overall in computer science and then enrollment of women and underrepresented groups in computer science. Then, as we kept working on this, we realized the reason computer science was lacking at the college level was because it had disappeared at the K-12 level. So in 2012, I became the national chair of Computer Science Education Week, which we'd been working on. So there was this whole push to computer science for all, to get computer science taught in the schools again. And part of the reason that that all came about was when computers were introduced to the schools in the 80s, all you could do was program them. There wasn't educational technology software, right? Most software, at the time we introduced the personal computer, most software was for mainframes. And so when I was in middle school and they had the Apple IIe, all we could do was write little programs. We couldn't do anything else with it. Well, pretty quickly, ed tech became a thing, became an industry, and people started making all this technology to teach kids with computers, and we kind of stopped teaching computers. So we're using computers to teach, and we kind of think, oh, well, this kid is using this device, they must be learning what makes it tick, but they're not. They're learning how to use it. And so we've created an entire population of technology users, not creators.
Ah,
So that was the goal of Computer Science for All. And then ultimately, I got recruited to the Obama White House in 2015 when I was on a very late night phone call with my contact at the White House, and we were talking about, what was coming up in terms of the new the 2016 State of the Union, and they were looking for organizations that would step up to lean into computer science for all. And I said, hey, I've been thinking about applying to one of these White House fellowships, but they seem like they're for emerging leaders, and I've kind of already emerged. And he's like, you want a fellowship? I'll make one. When can you get here? And so boom, I was in the White House a few months later after all the security clearances and everything. And so I had the immense privilege of leading um, tech inclusion for the Obama White House for roughly 10 months of 2016 and 17, which was the hardest but most rewarding job I think I've ever had in my life. And also the most productive, high output team I've ever been on in my life. And we got a lot of things done. And I learned a lot about how these big systems work and how big systems can be leveraged to get things done. And so one of the things that I was really keen on when I was there was convincing the defense and intelligence sector that K-12 computer science was actually their problem to solve because defense is technology. And having all Americans be technologically savvy is part of national defense. And so I managed to introduce some legislation actually after I left the White House that ultimately was passed in the 2022 Defense Act that would authorize DoD funding into the K-12 system to prepare more students for computer science. Because if we don't have young people coming out of school with technology training, they're not going to be ready to go into the military, which is ultimately a technology enterprise now.
Yeah, and in fact, it's looks like the AI acceleration is just dramatic. I'm sure you have some opinions about that. But so from that, tell me how you discovered or thought up the the last mile solution to this big sort of organism. You talk about the whole education system, almost like it's like an intestinal system, and you got to kind of get through all these like pathways, and then the way you've described it to me in the past is you sort of found a clog. So
Yeah,
tell
a
us all
late,
about that.
yeah. Yeah, so I have spent my entire career and been a part of what I call the STEMspiration ecosystem, right? There's robotics, there's Girls Who Code and Code.org and all these organizations, lots of them, thousands of them, working to get kids into the system, right? To inspire kids to, of all types, but especially underrepresented kids, to consider careers in STEM. And I've been a part of that through Girl Scouts and many other organizations. I built a big national longitudinal community called Aspirations in Computing, which is now 35,000 young women across the US that are in this community. And thanks to the joys of social media, I've been able to pay attention to what they're doing and like stay in touch with them. There I have LinkedIn connections with them, I have Facebook, and we have a Slack channel. So I'm paying attention to this very large group of young women that I kind of consider my girls, my mentees. And in many instances, they were reaching out to me for help. And I would use my social capital or my personal capital to solve whatever challenge they were facing. And it was really dumb things. Like I had one young woman who had been offered an internship at, let's just say, a major tech company in California. And she had had two successful internships at other companies. And 2 weeks before the start of the fall term, she took her mother on one of those cruises to the Bahamas. Her mother was 52. Her mother had a heart attack and died in the Bahamas on that cruise. And this poor girl had to then get her mother's body back to the United States, deal with the funeral, deal with all of that at 19, 20, by herself. She's,
Huge. Yeah.
on her own. And of course, her fall term grades reflected that. Like she was in a stressful situation. Well, this company sent her an automated email saying, "We just got your grades. We're canceling your internship." And you have one shot at getting an internship. There's a window in the fall. And fortunately, I knew the head of DEI at that company, and I was able to call him and explain the situation and be like, "You don't want to throw this girl in the trash. She's quite successful. She just has had this life situation." And so I was able to solve that. And so I kept doing things like that, right? And noticing that these really promising students were stumbling in the late stages, not because they had an academic issue, but because they had a life issue. And if you have a life issue and you have parents like yourself that can support that, you can survive that. But if you don't, that's a really risky, vulnerable place to be. And so we stood up a fund in 2019, and I've been thinking about this for a long time of like, how do I scale this solution? Like, you can't just happen to know me or happen to know another adult that's going to step in for you. Like, what's the like systemic way to solve this? And so I started a small fund and I started whispering to university like presidents and faculty and being like, hey, we have a little bit of money if you, I only had like $100,000. And so we were kind of testing the model. And then COVID happened, and a number of funders wanted to do something to help students. They're like, we heard you're helping students. So they threw about $300,000 at me. And I was able to very rapidly turn that around to support over 300 students in March and April of 2020, which students were in crisis. March and April of 2020, these kids were stranded. They didn't have a way home. They didn't have food or resources. And what most people don't realize is when the CARES Act went into place, if you were an adult, you got $1,400 from the government. If you were a child under 17, you got $700 to your parents for you. If you were a college student, your college got that money and they
Ah,
were supposed to give it to you. And some colleges are still deploying their CARES Act money now. They didn't deploy it because colleges are not fast organizations. They had sent all their staff home. So suddenly there was this massive $6 billion distributed to the higher ed system that was supposed to half of it flow into the hands of these stranded students. And in many cases, the schools just paid it onto their past due balances, which is paying themselves.
Yeah. Ruth,
So,
in the big picture, when you talk about this, and I want to put it in perspective for people, because all the time we hear about the enormous cost of education, and it's big numbers thrown around, 70,000 a year, 80,000 a year. Oh, okay. But what I know of last mile and what you do, can you actually sort of generalize a little bit at actually how little money
oh,
some of these
it's
kids
ridiculous. It's
need?
ridiculously nominal.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean,
So,
just sort of, and again, I know you have great examples, by the way. We're going to refer everybody when we're done to your website to make contributions, to help, to read the inspiring stories. But we're not talking about $80,000 a student here, right?
no, it's literally like 2 grand.
Yeah, it's
Like
like,
it's so ridiculously small.
yes.
And we have funded now. So I launched this in 2020, went public in 2021. We have now funded 14,000 individual students. And that came to $17 million. So on average, it's around $1,300. We think the secret sauce, the secret number is 2,500 to really like make sure because the students will come back to us. We encourage them to come back to us. About 25% will get more than one infusion of cash. And what's really unique about Last Mile is these are not scholarships. There is no selectivity to the process. We're like, if you were in this major and you have a shot at graduating, we say yes because we can't afford to lose them. Every student who's gotten that far, there's about over $600,000 of sunk costs, societal sunk costs, plus the opportunity cost that that student has, not been working for those years. And so we can solve that and get them over the finish line for under $2,500 typically. And we have what's incredible is we have an 80% graduation rate. The graduation rate for all students in all income levels in the United States is 65%. And so we are beating the national graduation rate, and we're also doubling the graduation rate of Pell eligible students. So that's typically 40% graduate within 6 years. And so we're filling this leak. So what we've realized is there's not a talent pipeline shortage, there's a leakage problem. That we're putting a lot of talent in the pipeline, but we're only getting about 40% out of the lower income students. So if we can just solve that late stage graduation problem, we can get all kinds of talent out the other side into life-changing jobs. I mean, we've calculated that one of our graduates in 1 year has a $59,000 earnings premium. That's 59,000 more than they would have earned with some college and no degree, and a lifetime gain of $2.7 million for 2,500 bucks.
Yeah,
And
it's
then, they're
incredible.
going to contribute to the economy, they're going to buy cars and homes, they're going to pay taxes. Like we all benefit from that person graduating.
Yeah, it's incredible because when you talk about this, it's almost like financial plumbing solution. Like there's this clog, right? And you have to like get the clog out, and it's cost so little to call a plumber. It's like 2,500 bucks, right? And they come
Right.
out the other end of it, right? Able to earn and pay taxes and everything else. And and again, this is where the K-shaped economy comes into it because there's a lot of folks, and I'm sure folks that are going to be listening to this, there's a lot of folks who just cannot imagine someone in their last 18 months of education being hung up over less than $3,000 because
Well,
frankly, there are two Americas. There's a whole bunch of people who actually that they lose that in their couch, watching TV.
I think that most people who would be listening to this podcast might not know what it's like to be that economically fragile. And I know what it's like because I grew up that way. And so I, have a lot of empathy for the students that I'm talking to and how precarious they are. And so I think this is I wouldn't say favorite, but this is a very good example. So a few years ago, there was a shooting in Michigan at Michigan State. It was a big deal. There was a shooter. He wasn't caught for a few days. And so the whole city shut down. For 3 weeks, the city shut down. They had everyone shelter in place, no restaurants, no nothing. A month later, we got dozens of applications from students in Michigan who were like, I didn't work for 3 weeks and now I can't pay my rent. I didn't work for 3 weeks, now I can't eat. So these kids are walking a tightrope. And if anything gets out of balance, a car repair, a chipped tooth, new tires. I mean, you can't replace one
Yep.
tire. You
Right.
know,
Yeah.
you go to fix a tire, you end up with four tires, right? So
Right.
these
Right.
kids are so fragile because they're on their own, they've created our higher ed system plans your finances a year in advance and there's no room for error. And so we're picking up that error and being like, we think you've demonstrated your potential and we think you're a good investment. And if we make this investment in you, you are going to be successful for a long time. Turns out, you know, VCs will invest in 10 companies knowing only one's going to be successful, right? Because they're
Yeah.
looking for the unicorns.
Yeah.
I'm investing in 10 and I'm getting 8 out of 10.
Yeah. And tell me, Ruth, how do they find? You just hit a really good point, which is, now that we sort of talked a little bit about your life story and how you got here in the last mile, then of course, why do we want you to be such a big secret? Because if I ask 10 people who last mile is, because they won't know who it is, because they're not in that situation. They're not economically fragile. So in Michigan, when this happened, tell me if you can, if you've actually got your finger on this. So, did these kids get to you from the institution, friends and family? How did they find Last Mile?
So, the number one way early on was faculty. And so the faculty, having been at the National Center for Women in IT in the White House, I have a mailing list to pretty much all the faculty in the country. And I just like emailed them and said, hey, I've got this money. And then now, faculty are still a really strong force for getting the word out, and also, college staff. But the students, once they know about it, they share. And what's really different about us is because we're not putting students into a group of 10 and picking the best one. We're looking at every student as an individual. So there's no competition for you to tell another friend about this. Right? It's not going to take anything
Right.
from you. Most scholarships are like, we're going to get 10,000 applicants and pick 200 people. We don't want that. We want to say yes to everyone who needs the help. And we look at each student as an individual. And then more importantly, every student is getting this money as a gift. They're not getting a 1099. It's not messing up their taxes. It's not messing up their financial aid. It is no different than if your grandma was like, here's some cash. And so we're able to help them in a way that's really meaningful because if you give someone a scholarship, it's really limited what it can be used for and to be considered a scholarship. So we're giving them this cash in a trust-based way and be like, we believe in you. We think you're a great investment. And guess what happens? They graduate and they come back and they volunteer and they write blogs for us and they donate. Like our first alumni donor was October of 2020. We funded her in March of 2020. She graduated, she started a job at Microsoft, and in October, she's like, it's the month of giving. Of course, you're my first choice. So I'm building really, I don't think it's a short-term sustainability strategy, but it's a 15-year sustainability strategy
I,
because
I
my
would say,
alumni,
Ruth, I know that you are super knowledgeable in all things education and financial, but I will tell you from my world, this is what we call the flywheel. I mean, you have built essentially the flywheel, which is, you got this thing started, and now these students, you're going to be graduating just literally thousands of funders, right?
yeah, we're graduating 3,000 students this spring, this year. Like, and so they're graduating. And here's the other thing that's really crazy. So we have students at 1,119 institutions, right? And this is where I want companies to work with us. So as a company, you can maybe recruit from 10, 15 schools. You have the capacity to recruit from a handful of schools. Takes a lot of time, staff, or you can pay a lot of money to go sponsor a recruiting fair at a conference and stand next shoulder to shoulder with your competitors and, sort of fight for talent. And you're fighting for the talent that could actually take the time and the money to go to that conference, right?
Yeah.
For a similar kind of investment, you could work with us and I can pinpoint for you where do they go to school? What are they majoring in? When are they graduating? What are their career aspirations? Geographic, like I've got the whole map of the whole United States. I know exactly who every student is. We have a LinkedIn profile on every applicant, so we know where they end up working. And here's the best news. Out of really 14,000 students, less than 200 of them have been at Ivy or Ivy adjacent schools. Yet, our top employers are Amazon, Microsoft, AWS, Google, NASA, Capital One, Bank of America. Like they are going to top companies. They're highly qualified students. And I would argue that a student who has navigated higher ed in the United States as a kid from poverty, figured out our totally screwed up financial aid system. I'm like, affluent parents pay for consultants to help their
Yeah,
kids figure out financing college. You know this is true.
totally. Totally.
These kids figured it out on their own. They persisted through all kinds of struggles. That is a great employee.
Yeah. This is
That
an
is a
employee with
brilliant
spine. Yeah,
employee.
right.
That's who you want to hire. So I really am looking to partner with companies that want to do this obviously as a part of their CSR strategy,
Mhm.
100%, but I want it to be part of their talent acquisition strategy. Because if a university has a completion fund like this, which I think they all should have, that's not tied to a job. Whereas I'm taking money from a corporation and handing it to a student at the critical last 2 years when they're deciding where they're going to work. And so when we fund a student, it says your grant sponsored, your award sponsored by Ford, sponsored by
Oh, yeah, okay. So they
Microsoft,
know.
sponsored by, yeah. And so I,
Great.
I sort of jokingly say, I'm like, what is going to impress them more? A hoodie or a water bottle at a career fair, or that you paid their rent their senior year of college?
Yeah. Tell
And so
me,
we're building those relationships.
yeah, in terms of parameters, and I should ask you before, but just go ahead and say who you fund. It's all undergrad students, and it's
Right.
the last 24 months. Is that it?
Yeah, so we do fund students at if they're in a degree in a terminal degree program. So if you're in a community college 2-year cybersecurity program, that counts too.
Okay.
So we do fund students at each degree level. Our primary core funding is available for essentially juniors and seniors in their last 6 to 18 months, two last 4 semesters of a degree in a high demand STEM field. So
Okay.
we focus on computer science, engineering. We have a big semiconductor talent program with the semiconductor industry. And I'm happy to say we are expanding now into quantitative fields, math, um, actuarial, data science, statistics, into the whole like quant sector. And we're doing that with some major funders in the finance industry because they want talent too, especially with the AI um, changing everything. Highly quantitative talent is extremely desirable because that's really the foundation of AI.
Which is what I was going to ask you next. So, we've talked about the whole story of like where you came from, how the Girl Scouts helped launch you and everything. So, what's next for Last Mile and Ruth Farmer? What do you see coming? This is like big times. AI is changing everything, and I have to say, I a little shook sometimes. We actually just had one of our clients from Oracle get laid off, and of course they're going to blame everybody's going to blame AI for a lot of things. However, AI's got just a spectacular potential. I think potential is probably the best word. We don't really know yet exactly. But what do you see in the future for Last Mile and Ruth Farmer?
Well, so last mile, my goal is to raise the money to really, I would like to endow this effort because the speed at which the higher education system is going to be able to do this is too slow. And so if we had $30 million a year to invest in students, I could essentially increase the national output of engineers by 4 or 5%. And 30 million a year is like 10,000 students. That's like chump change, right? And that's all in. And so my goal is to raise the money to be able to do this and serve essentially 70% of the need. So the need annually is 13,800 students that we're losing to this issue. And I'd like to serve 10,000 So 70% of those. So that's my goal. And ultimately, I think we need probably a 300 to $500 million endowment, depending on what interest rates are doing, to generate that kind of revenue. Right now, we're serving about 5,000 students a year, and our only limitation is capital. Like if we had the capital, we could serve more students. And so raising that capital is one of my key day-to-day tasks, obviously. Um, I also really want people to just reimagine how we think about talent and who we invest in and who deserves to be receiving an investment. So our entire system of higher education in the United States was built around this filtering out, weeding out model, because when we built it, we only needed a very small number of highly educated people to manage a lot of less educated workers, right? With AI, we now need a lot of very highly educated people who can architect systems and who can manage intelligent machines. So while I know we're facing a lot of disruption right now in what AI is doing to the talent ecosystem, and that's going to happen for a while, but I think when the rubber meets the road, we need more people who are more educated and knowledgeable, not less. And so who those people are is what I'm concerned with. And so if the people who experience poverty and have empathy for others aren't part of building that, then it's going to get worse and worse, right? Because technology and automation can be quite dehumanizing. And so I want the full breadth of humans at the table building it. So that's where I'm hoping Last Mile is going to be this national resource, but also be part of the data. Like I'm doing this to prove that this is a better way of investing. That if we invested with abundance in everyone who has a shot, that's a better use of resources than picking a bunch of outliers, like picking 10 outliers we know are super people because they've already gotten perfect grades and perfect everything. That's great, but we have a 700,000 worker shortage in cyber. In cyber alone, 700,000. They're saying 1.4 million worker shortage in tech. In semiconductors, it's 126,000 a year. So like we need the talent and we're leaving so much on the table. So that's where I'm hoping that Last Mile lives way beyond me and is just this resource because it makes sense, it's easy, it's low cost, and it solves a huge problem that nobody's paying attention to for, 2,500 bucks a person. Like why not do it? It just makes sense. And for me personally, I'm thinking about writing a book. Um,
Okay.
I I've got a book in me, definitely. I probably get an email 2 or 3 times a week from somebody being like, shouldn't you write a book? So it's come up a lot lately, and I'm thinking about that. And I'm thinking about this whole thing that I'm kind of calling this abundance imperative, because um, if you, I grew up in a way where I was the new kid so many times that I figured out how to relate to lots of different kinds of people from all walks of life. And I sometimes laugh about like, I have a really good friend. She's like, you always talk to people on planes. I would never talk to people on planes. I'm like, I talked to Paul Morrow on the plane for like an hour flight and look
Here we
what
are.
happened. Like we've been friends for more than a decade
Years.
now. Like,
It's really
of course.
funny. Yeah, it's
And
very funny. Well, talking to people is a skill too. I have to say, you're pretty good at it. And I do think that talking, or expressing something, things like the abundance theory, which is interesting. This afternoon, I'm actually recording a podcast with a guy named Rick Miller, and he's a big, big time charitable person who I'm sure will enjoy watching your podcast. But Rick has quite a history, very interesting personal life story history. And he has taken a personal interest in a number of struggling students, which I won't want to steal his thunder, but I'm going to talk about it later because today seems to be my day for talking to people about helping those who need the help the most. Because again, I keep referring to the K-shaped economy, and I live in New England, and there's a whole lot of people who just cannot even, they just can't somehow get into their lens the fact that $2,500 means anything to anybody, like in this day and age. It's just their life experience. It's different, and I don't fault them, by the way. I love I mean, I've been a capitalist and I love people who are successful. They deserve to be successful and make a lot of money. That's all great. However, their lenses become quite narrowed down, because of their golf club and their yacht club and their whatever. And so you have to sort of penetrate that, which is what I'm hoping to do a little bit with this podcast, is that I think that we could perhaps penetrate that membrane where they understand that if they have a company and they've got some resources that, boy, this is helping a lot of people with actually a very small barrier to success. $2,500 to get somebody out this clogged pipe out the other end as a productive, tax-paying, what are they saying? It's a wonderful life, a thrifty, hardworking population, whatever. I mean, you're right on. And I think, of course, you're the best spokesman for Last Mile, but you on video could be a great spokesman for Last Mile as well. And I think we're going to try to help a little bit of that.
Well, I really appreciate that. And I have a message for all your golf club
Here
friends.
we go. Here we go. I knew it was coming.
Everybody wants to like name a scholarship and endow something at their university, etc. We had a gift we received last year from a family that was interested in funding students in three states, Georgia, Tennessee, and Kentucky. And they gave us a pretty significant gift. Had they deployed that money as a scholarship, it would have been months, if not at least a year, before any dollars actually made it to a student. But also, there would have been this very expensive selection process, winnowing down process, etc. And chances are it would have helped students who already were getting lots of help because the scholarship process itself tends to want to be risk averse and, pick winners, right?
Right.
Whereas our process is let's pick every possible runner, knowing that they might run faster if they all have shoes on, right? That's
Right.
kind of the model. So that family gave us that money. We got the check June 30th. The first student to fund it was July 2nd. So your golf friends, all those friends who want to do something, you can hand us any amount of money. And you can say, I want this to be for Massachusetts, or I want this to be for computer science, or I want this to be for, you know, kids with a heritage in the Hispanic community, whatever. And I will just do that. And I can deploy that, and it costs very little administratively. And that's what's so valuable about this model is we're skimming away this whole like expensive administration process and just getting the cash to the people who need it quickly at scale. I mean, we're deploying like $500,000 a month, and I'm doing that with 10 staff. And I don't intend to be 40, 50 people. And I look at some of the scholarship organizations out there, they have 40, 50, 60, 100 staff, and they're supporting a few hundred kids a year. We're going to support 5,000 kids this year. So it's a great way to invest your money, know it has impact, and then I can tell you at the end of the year exactly how many students I funded, how many graduated, and where they are today.
Wow, what a joyful thing. To talk about abundance. That's a great thing. It's a great way to end. And I'm going to thank Ruth. And I'm also going to remind everybody that if you just hang on, all the contact information is going to appear. Not that Ruth Farmer is hard to find. You can Google Ruth Farmer and she will pop up all over the place for all the wonderful things that she's done. And if you really can't find her, you can always reach out to me. As I've always said on all of our podcasts, you can't find somebody on a podcast, contact me. And you never know, Ruth might even be at my house in Colorado at the time that we do this. So, Ruth, thanks so much for joining us today. I look forward to seeing you again personally. But for now, it's great to see you in cyberspace. And you continue on your great work with Last Mile, and we'll keep everybody in touch on the things that you're doing. So, let's say goodbye to Ruth Farmer. All right.
Thanks, Paul.
All right. Thank you.